What would you do if something appeared in deep space, with no entry point, no signal, no approach vector, and then started watching you back? Not sending a message, not moving, not threatening, just sitting there, at the edge of everything, in the exact place where empty space used to be, as if it had always belonged to the dark and you were only now noticing it. That is what Idris Vale was looking at. The signal arrived the way a shadow arrives, without crossing the space in between. One moment there was nothing. The next, there was something that should not have been there, holding position at the outer edge of the system as if it had always belonged to the dark. Station Kepri did not register it as a threat. It did not register it as anything at all for the first 2.3 seconds. The system's sensors swept past it, cataloging debris, radiation drift, and the slow rotation of distant ice, and simply failed to understand what they were seeing. Then the correction routines engaged. The object resolved. Not large, not small, not moving. Watching. Idris Vale sat alone in the observation chamber the way he had sat alone in it for 11 years. Still, focused, certain. He was the kind of man who had learned to find comfort in reduction, in the act of taking something vast and unnamed and making it small enough to file. He had been chosen for this post precisely because of that quality. His supervisors had written, in 3 separate evaluations, that Idris Vale was not a man who panicked. He was a man who categorized. He pulled the object onto the main display and began. Distance, 42 astronomical units from the central star. That placed it in the deep outer system, well beyond the frost line, in the region where sunlight arrived as little more than a suggestion and temperatures hovered near absolute zero. The kind of place where things drifted, slowly, for centuries. Position, stable. Velocity, 0 relative drift. Energy signature, minimal. He paused on that last line. Not because it alarmed him, because it was slightly inefficient in a way his experience told him to notice. Objects in deep space tended to either move or decay. Stillness, true stillness, required intention. Something had to be doing the work of staying still. And whatever that something was, it was not showing up in any of his instruments. He adjusted the filters. Thermal scan, inconclusive. Material composition, unknown. Signal emission, none. He leaned back slightly in his chair. The movement was small, almost unnecessary, but it marked a shift. Not an urgency. Not yet. Inattention. The kind of shift a man makes when something he expected to resolve in 30 seconds has not resolved in 90, and his body knows it before his mind admits it. He ran the classification protocols. Natural object? No. Artificial debris? No. Human construct? No record. He checked the registry twice, then a third time. Not because he expected a different result, but because repetition was part of the method. The method worked. It always had. In 11 years, nothing had failed to eventually fit somewhere. Even the strangest things. Even the things that initially seemed to defy category. They always resolved. They always found their column. He told himself this one would too. Unregistered object, he said aloud, his voice quiet in the empty chamber. There was something grounding about hearing his own voice. A small act of normalcy in a room that was beginning to feel slightly less normal than it had a few minutes ago. The station did not respond. It was not designed to respond to statements, only commands. He tagged the object. Opened a new file. Designation, provisional. Status, under observation. He zoomed in. The object did not sharpen the way most things did when magnified. It did not reveal panels or seams or the familiar geometry of human engineering. It held its shape the way a thought holds its shape. Precise, contained, resistant to interpretation. He adjusted the zoom again. Nothing clarified. He felt something then, briefly, at the edge of his awareness. Not concern. Not quite. Something smaller. A misalignment between expectation and result. The faint, quiet discomfort of a man who is very good at his work encountering something that does not cooperate with it. He moved past it. There would be time to understand. There was always time to understand. He opened the long-range logs and scrolled backward through the hours before detection. No entry. No approach vector. No arrival signature. The object had not entered the system in any way the station could detect. It had simply appeared. One moment absent. The next, present. As if the concept of arriving did not apply to it. He stopped scrolling. He sat with the empty stretch of recorded space before the timestamp where the object now existed. Hours of nothing. Days of nothing. The quiet, predictable absence of anything unusual. Then the object. He marked the timestamp. He tagged the gap. He did not allow himself to speculate about what the gap meant. Speculation was not part of the method. The method kept him steady. The method kept things manageable. He initiated a passive skin sweep, wider this time, extending beyond the object into the surrounding dark. The sensors reached out, touched the edges of nothing, returned with the same answer they always returned. Empty, except for the object. He watched it. It did not move. It did not signal. It did not react to being observed. He noted this. He typed it carefully, the way he typed everything. Observation, no detectable interaction. He sat with the display for a while. The system's clock marked the passage of 17 seconds. Then 42. Then 1 minute, 7 seconds. Time moved the way it always moved, steady and indifferent, but the moment had a different texture to it now. Denser. He did not like that word. He preferred words that could be measured. He initiated a second scan, this time with deeper penetration. The data returned fragmented, incomplete, as if the object did not reflect information in the expected ways. He increased power. The data improved slightly, but not enough to resolve structure. The inefficiency continued. He opened a side channel and checked for external confirmation. Other stations, long-range probes, civilian arrays. Nothing. No one else had reported the object. For now, it existed only in his field of view. He was alone with it. He told himself that was not unusual. Most discoveries began this way. One observer, one anomaly, one file opened in the quiet. He created a secondary log, separate from the official report. Not because protocol required it, but because experience had taught him that some observations did not fit cleanly into standard categories. He did not name the log. He simply began. Object present at 42 Australian dollars. He typed. No entry signature. No emission. No response. He paused, then added, holding position. He read the line back. It was accurate. It was insufficient. He left it. He shifted to the standard survey sequence, the one designed for unknown objects that did not immediately present a threat. A familiar structure he had followed so many times it no longer required conscious effort. The system unfolded the steps, and he moved through them with the quiet efficiency of long repetition. Mass estimation first. The station's sensors measured gravitational influence, subtle distortions in nearby particulate drift, the faint pull exerted on the smallest debris passing within range. The numbers populated slowly, resolving into a range rather than a fixed value. Lower than expected. He adjusted the model. Ran it again. Same result. The object had presence without proportion. It occupied space. It displaced the dark. But its measurable mass did not align with that occupation in any clean way. He noted the discrepancy without comment and moved on. Surface analysis. Light absorption, reflection, spectral breakdown. The object absorbed most frequencies and returned a fraction in patterns that did not repeat. No clear material signature. No composite layering that matched known alloys or synthetics. He tagged it. Non-standard composition. That was acceptable. Unknown materials appeared occasionally at the edges of mapped space. Rare, but not unprecedented. He continued. Structural scan. The system attempted to map edges, contours, internal divisions. The display flickered between interpretations. Solid, hollow, segmented, continuous. None of them holding long enough to confirm. It was as if the object allowed itself to be seen only partially, never in full agreement with the tools designed to define it. He ran the scan again, and again. On the third pass he stopped. The variations were consistent in one way. They were always incomplete. He leaned back slightly. Not a failure. A limitation. He recorded it that way. Next, radiation output. Background levels only. No spikes. No emissions. Nothing to suggest active systems. He checked for residual heat. None. Electromagnetic leakage. None. Signal bleed. The faint noise most systems produced even when silent. None. He paused on that. Silence in deep space was common. Perfect silence was not. Nothing that existed produced nothing. Even the most inert matter shed something. A photon, a thermal whisper, the faintest electromagnetic exhale. This object shed nothing. Absolute, flawless silence. In a universe that had never once been truly quiet in all the time he had been listening to it. He typed, emissions within null range. It looked cleaner that way. He moved to positional tracking. The object remained fixed relative to the star, but more importantly, it remained fixed relative to everything else. Drift calculations returned 0. Micro-adjustments, the kind even stationary objects exhibited under gravitational influence, were absent. It was not holding position the way satellites held position, with constant small corrections, the way a man holds his balance by never quite stopping moving. It was holding position absolutely, as if it had never considered moving, as if motion were a concept that applied to other things. He ran a long-term projection. 10 minutes forward, no change. 1 hour, no change. He extended it to 12 hours. The system hesitated, then returned the same answer. No change. He closed that window. There was no value in projecting stillness. He opened the comparative database. Known probes, abandoned constructs, experimental platforms, classified military hardware. The system searched through decades of records, thousands of entries, narrowing, filtering, rejecting. No match. He continued through the checklist. Kinetic potential, negligible. Threat projection based on mass and velocity, minimal. Collision risk, 0. He moved on. Environmental interaction. Dust patterns around the object showed slight deviation. Particles slowing as they approached, then continuing past without accumulation. No debris field. No impact residue. No sign that anything had ever struck it or been shed from it. Untouched. As if the universe had simply decided, at some point, not to touch it. He opened the summary pane. Unregistered object. Non-standard composition. No emissions. Stable position. Minimal threat. He read the list once. It looked correct. It felt incomplete. He had learned, over years of quiet work, that completeness was an illusion at this stage. You did not wait for full understanding. You built toward it. He saved the file. He marked it as ongoing. He returned to the live feed. The object remained exactly where it had been from the beginning. Unmoving. Unsignaling. Unresolved. He took one more pass through the data. Not because the protocol required it, but because repetition sometimes revealed what the first pass did not. Mass, same. Surface, same. Structure, same. Silence, the same. He stopped there. Not on the data itself, but on the pattern of it. Consistency. Absolute. Unbroken. No fluctuation. No drift. No noise. Just a thing that sat in space and refused, with total perfection, to give itself away. He stared at the display a second longer than necessary. Then he minimized the analysis pane and brought the object itself back to full view, centered against the dark. For a moment, he allowed himself to look at it without filters, without overlays, without numbers. Just the shape, just the presence. And in that moment, with the numbers stripped away, he felt the thing he had been carefully not feeling since the beginning. It was looking back. He told himself that was irrational. He exhaled slowly. He returned to the method. There were still steps remaining. There were always steps remaining. And somewhere within those steps, he told himself, the object would resolve into something known. He believed that. He needed to believe that. So he proceeded, steady and precise, deeper into the scan, unaware that the routine he trusted was about to encounter something it had never been designed to process. He initiated the next layer without hesitation, moving from passive observation to active probing. The station adjusted automatically, narrowing focus, increasing sensitivity, preparing to extract detail from silence. The first probe was light, a low-energy scan, designed to map surface response without interference. It touched the object the way a question touches a thought, gently, without expectation of resistance. The data returned immediately, unchanged. No reflection shift, no absorption variance, no delay. It was as if the scan had passed through empty space and reported back nothing unusual, except that the object was still there, occupying the same coordinates it had occupied before. He ran it again. Same result. He adjusted the angle, the frequency, the spread. Same result. He paused, not because the outcome surprised him, but because it did not evolve. Even resistant materials produced variation when examined from multiple vectors. Even the most uniform surfaces betrayed something under repetition. Scatter, refraction, a shadow of internal structure. Something always escaped. This did not. He marked it. Scan interaction inconclusive. He increased intensity. The second probe carried more energy, enough to force interaction, enough to produce measurable disruption if the object had structure in any conventional sense. The beam reached the object. The display flickered. For a fraction of a second, the data spiked. Not outward as reflection, but inward, collapsing into a single point that did not correspond to any model the system recognized. Then it was gone. The readings normalized. The object remained. He leaned forward. Just slightly. He replayed the moment. Frame by frame. The spike was there. Small. Precise. Wrong. He isolated it, magnified it, ran it through the station's analysis suite. No match. No classification. No explanation. He checked for system error. Diagnostics returned clean. He checked again. Clean. He sat with the data for a moment, longer than the method required. Then he ran the probe a third time. Same intensity. Same vector. This time, the spike did not occur. The beam touched the object. Nothing happened. He pulled up both scans and overlaid them. One contained the anomaly. The other did not. Identical inputs. Different outputs. He stared at the comparison for a long moment, and the thing he felt was not panic, because Idris Vale did not panic, but it was something adjacent to it. A coldness. The specific, quiet unease of a man who has just noticed that the rules have changed and has not yet determined what the new rules are. He tagged the anomaly. Single instance deviation. He almost deleted it. Then he didn't. He left it in the file, isolated, unconnected, waiting for context that did not yet exist. He moved to signal interaction. A directed pulse, simple and structured, the kind used to test responsiveness. Not communication. Not yet. Just a pattern. A presence made explicit. He transmitted. The pulse crossed the distance. 42 astronomical units, approximately 6.28 billion kilometers, reached the object in roughly 5 hours and 49 minutes of signal travel time. But Idris was working with real-time telemetry. He watched the return channel. And then something happened he had not anticipated. The sensors registered a distortion, subtle but measurable, as if the signal had been redirected without reflection, absorbed without loss, altered without trace. He checked the return. There was no return, but there was also no disappearance. The energy he had sent was not gone. It was unaccounted for. He ran the energy balance. Input, confirmed. Output, none. Residual, none. The equation did not close. He felt the pause again. That small, quiet hesitation that did not belong to the method. He labeled it, signal interaction undefined. He sent a second pulse. Different pattern, different frequency. Same result. Distortion. No return. No loss. He stopped. The method did not value repetition without progression. He leaned back. He looked at the object on the display. It had not moved. It had not changed. But something about the way it occupied the screen felt different now. It was no longer simply unknown. It was uncooperative. He opened the secondary log. Active probes produce inconsistent results, he typed. Single instance anomaly observed. Signal interaction does not conform to conservation models. He paused, then added, behavior is stable but not predictable. He read the line back. It was closer, not complete. He left it. He returned to the main interface. There was one more test in this sequence. Temporal response. A simple measurement. Send a signal. Measure delay. Everything in the physical world obeyed timing. Light traveled at exactly 299,792,458 meters per second. The math never lied. He configured the pulse. Minimal energy. Precise timestamp. He transmitted. The system began counting. Milliseconds. Microseconds. Nanoseconds. The return never came. But the system did not register absence. It registered something else. The timer did not continue. It stopped. Not at zero. Not at completion. At a value that did not correspond to any measurable delay. A number that existed at the boundary of what the instruments could represent. Not infinity, not nothing, but something in between that the system had no language for. A fraction that had no meaning within the framework. He stared at the number. He ran the test again. Same result. Different pulse. Same result. He checked the station's internal clock. It continued normally. Time was moving outside. Only the measurement tied to the object had stopped making sense. He sat very still. Then he closed the test. He recorded the behavior. Temporal response. Nonlinear. He knew it was not sufficient. He knew it was the most frightening thing he had written in 11 years. filed under the most sanitized language he could construct. He sat for a long time after saving that line. Long enough that the observation chamber felt different when he was done sitting. He minimized the testing interface. He brought the object back to full view. Centered. Unchanged. Silent. For the first time since the beginning, he did not immediately proceed to the next step. He allowed the gap to exist. 5 seconds. Then 10. Then 20. He did not fill it with action. He did not fill it with explanation. He simply looked at the object that did not return energy, did not obey time, did not reflect light predictably, did not arrive through any detectable vector, and had been there, by all available evidence, forever. It's not failing, he said quietly, to no one. The words sat in the room. He did not correct them. He continued. It's refusing. He let those words stay. Then he replaced them, in the report, with something that would survive review. Interaction is conditional. Better. Contained. Acceptable. But the thought remained underneath it. He stopped looking at the anomalies as separate entries. That had been the mistake. Not an error in process, but a limitation in perspective. The method encouraged isolation, each variable examined, categorized, contained. It worked because most systems behaved in ways that allowed them to be broken apart and understood piece by piece. This did not. He pulled the full dataset into a single view. Massachusetts energy, time, position, interaction, all of it layered together. For a moment the display looked like noise. Too many variables. Too many inconsistencies. Too many places where the expected relationships simply did not hold. Then the pattern emerged. Not in the data itself. In what the data refused to do. Every measurement that relied on passive observation held. Distance. Shape. Presence. Everything that required interaction broke. Energy did not return. Time did not progress. Structure did not resolve. He separated the two columns. External. Internal. External properties, position, outline, existence, remained consistent. Internal properties, composition, energy behavior, temporal response, refused definition. He thought about the word boundary. He did not write it. He tested the idea instead. He initiated a new scan, but limited it intentionally, restricting the depth, keeping it at the level of pure observation. The data returned clean, consistent, predictable. He increased the depth by a single increment. The data fractured, not partially, completely. He reduced it again, clean, increased again, fractured. He repeated the process 6 times. Same threshold, same break. Every time, there was a line, not visible, not physical, but present, exact, repeatable. On one side, the object could be observed. On the other, it could not. And nothing he possessed, no probe, no pulse, no measurement, was allowed to cross it. He mapped the exact boundary point, logged it, then sat with the implication of what he had just found. Not an absence of data, not a failure of equipment. A rule, a consistent, enforced rule that the object applied to everything that tried to know it too well. He returned to the temporal data. If time did not progress within the interaction, then the interaction itself was not occurring within the same frame. He ran comparisons against relativistic models. No match. Against quantum models. No match. He stopped trying to match it. He described it instead. Temporal interaction does not occur within measurable sequence. He read the line, left it, then said it aloud one more time, quietly, the way you say something when you are trying to make it real. Then he pulled everything together. External consistency. Internal inaccessibility. Interaction threshold. Energy discontinuity. Temporal interruption. He looked at the list. Then he opened the secondary log. Observed anomalies are not independent, he typed. They form a consistent pattern tied to interaction depth. He paused, then added, object permits observation at surface level. Deeper probing results in loss of measurable data. He continued, energy and temporal inconsistencies occur only during active engagement. He stopped, then added one more line. Behavior suggests controlled boundary between observable and unobservable states. He stared at that sentence. It was the first time the data had implied structure beyond physical form. Not shape, not mass. Structure of behavior. A thing that had decided, at some level Idris Vale could not reach, what it would and would not allow. He leaned back. The room felt quieter. Not because anything had changed, but because something had aligned. He opened the main report. scrolled to the threat assessment. The number was 0.2. He did not change it. He added a line beneath it. Assessment does not reflect interaction-based anomalies. He saved it. Then he sat there, hands resting on the console, eyes on the object, and let the understanding settle into place. Not complete, not comfortable, but coherent. And in that coherence, something shifted. The object was no longer just unknown. It was structured in a way his system had never been designed to measure. He did not initiate the next test. For the first time since the object appeared, he allowed the station to sit idle. No probes, no signals, no interaction, just observation. Passive sensors sweeping, recording, confirming the same external consistency from the beginning. Position, unchanged. Emission, none. Structure, unresolved. Everything stable. He leaned back, hands off the console, and let the moment stretch. Nothing happened. He told himself that was expected. Then something changed. Not in the object. In the data stream. A small flag appeared in the peripheral feed, not on the main display, not in the primary analysis window, but in a secondary channel he had left open out of habit. Long-range background monitoring. The kind of data most analysts filtered out because it rarely contained anything useful. The flag blinked once, then held. He turned his head slightly, eyes shifting to the side display. The reading was simple. Signal detected. He frowned, just slightly. That channel monitored outbound noise, reflections, stray transmissions, the low-level leakage of the station itself bouncing off distant objects and returning distorted, delayed, usually meaningless. He opened it. The signal resolved into a pattern. Not random. Structured. He checked the source. Not the station. Not any known relay. Origin, 42 Australian dollars. His eyes moved back to the main display. The object had not moved. He looked at the signal again. It was not strong. Not a broadcast. Narrow. Directed. He ran the timestamp. The signal had not been emitted after his last probe. It had been emitted during it. He pulled the logs forward, aligning the exact moment his final active scan had crossed the interaction threshold. The signal appeared at the same instant. Not after. Not delayed. Simultaneous. He felt the alignment settle in his chest before he put it into words. It had not responded. It had reacted, as if it had been waiting for him to find the boundary. As if the boundary was not a wall. It was a door, and he had just knocked on it. He isolated the pattern. Simple. Too simple. A sequence of intervals. Repeating. He ran it through the station's basic analysis. No match. He increased the depth. Still no match. He adjusted the filter. Converted the signal into raw intervals. Numbers. Clean. Precise. He stared at them. Then he recognized them. Not from the database. From something more fundamental. Something any mathematically literate civilization would eventually discover on its own. Independent of language. Independent of biology. Independent of everything except the shared logic of numbers. Prime spacing. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The intervals between transmission pulses corresponded to prime numbers, the integers divisible only by themselves, and 1. Not perfectly aligned, not exact, the kind of precision that would take translation, but close enough that the pattern could not be accidental. The probability of achieving this distribution by chance was so low it effectively did not exist. He ran a quick verification. Yes, prime intervals. He did not move for a moment. His hands rested still on the console. His breathing had slowed without him noticing. 11 years of training, 11 years of reduction and categorization and disciplined restraint. And for the first time in all of it, he did not reach immediately for the next step in the protocol. He just sat with it. Then he checked the directionality. The signal was not broadcasting outward in all directions. It was pointed. At the station. At him. Specifically. Precisely. The way you point at something you have already found. He opened the secondary log. Then stopped. He did not type. Instead, he watched the signal. It repeated. Steady. Patient. He checked the strength. Low. Deliberately low. Just enough to be detected by something already looking. Not enough to be found by anything else. Calibrated. As if it understood the difference between being heard and being overheard. He ran a sweep of external systems. No one else had flagged it. No one else was seeing this. He was still alone, but not in the same way. He returned to the pattern. Prime intervals. A universal baseline. The simplest possible statement of intelligence. Not language. Not yet. Just the first word of a vocabulary. Just presence. Awareness. The mathematical equivalent of someone clearing their throat in a dark room so you know you are not alone. He exhaled slowly. And then he did something he had not done since the beginning. He initiated a response. Not a full transmission. Not a message. A mirror. He took the received sequence and reflected it back along the same vector. Matching timing. Matching amplitude. Matching structure. The station executed the command. The signal left. Crossed the 6.28 billion kilometer distance. Reached the object. He watched the return channel. Nothing. 1 second. 2. 3. Then the signal changed. Not stronger. Not faster. Different. The intervals shifted. Not randomly. Adjusted. Refined. He pulled both sequences side by side. Incoming. Outgoing. Incoming again. The pattern was evolving. He felt it now. Unmistakable. The object was not just reacting to interaction. It was adapting to it. Learning from it in real time. Or demonstrating that it had already learned. He could not tell which was more unsettling. He leaned closer, eyes scanning the numbers as they updated. The primes extended. Longer sequence. More precise spacing. Less deviation. He checked the timing. The response was immediate. No measurable delay. The same temporal anomaly as before, but now it carried information. He whispered, almost without realizing it, "You're not just there." The words stayed in the room. He did not correct them. He continued the exchange. Another reflection. Another adjustment. The sequence grew. Layered now. Not just primes. Ratios. Relationships. Mathematical structures that built on each other the way language builds on grammar. The beginnings of something beyond simple presence. He stopped. Not because he could not continue. Because he understood what continuing would mean. This was no longer observation. No longer analysis. It was interaction. And interaction, he was beginning to understand, had consequences he had not yet calculated. He sat back slowly, breaking the rhythm, letting the incoming signal continue without response. The pattern held for a few cycles, then stabilized, then waited. He watched it. Then he opened the main report, scrolled to the threat assessment. 0.2. He looked at the number for a long time. Then he added a single line beneath everything else. Object demonstrates responsive behavior to external input. He paused, then added another. Signal exchange initiated. He read both lines. They were correct. They were deeply insufficient. He closed the report. He opened the secondary log. His fingers hovered over the keys. Then he typed, slowly. "It is not passive." He stopped. Then continued. "It is not unresponsive." He read that. Then added one more line. "It is aware." He sat there, looking at the word. Aware. It did not belong in the method. It did not belong in the categories. It did not belong anywhere he had worked for 11 years. But it fit. He saved the log. He returned to the main display. The object remained at the edge of the system, exactly where it had always been. Still. Silent. Except now, in a narrow channel that only he was watching, it was no longer quiet. And for the first time since the beginning of the observation, he was no longer entirely certain he was the one in control of what happened next. He did not respond immediately. The signal continued, steady and precise, holding its structure as if it understood the value of patience. It was not pushing. It was allowing. He brought the full exchange into view, layering every transmission since the first detection. His reflections, its adjustments, the evolution from simple primes to structured ratios. It was no longer a signal. It was a conversation that had not yet been acknowledged as one. He exhaled slowly and leaned forward. This time, he did not mirror. He changed the pattern. He constructed a new sequence, still mathematical, still clean, but no longer reactive. A statement instead of a reflection. Prime intervals. Then repetition. Then interruption. A break in the expected progression, deliberate, to see what it would do. He sent it. The signal crossed the distance. Reached the object. The return came instantly. Not a mirror. Not an echo. A correction. The interruption he had introduced was removed. Replaced with continuity. He watched it. Then sent another. A ratio that did not resolve cleanly. The return adjusted it. Balanced it. Completed it. He felt the structure lock into place in his mind. Not random. Not exploratory. Deterministic. Whatever was on the other side of 6.28 billion kilometers of silence had rules. And the rules were not suggestions. He tested it again. A sequence designed to diverge. The return forced convergence. He sat back. "You're minimizing error," he said aloud. The words stayed in the room. He did not take them back. He leaned forward again. If the system corrected deviation, then it was not just responding. It was optimizing. He constructed a larger sequence. Layered primes. Ratios. Intentional noise. He sent it. The response came back refined. Cleaned. Simplified. Every inefficiency removed. Every ambiguity resolved into a single, stable pattern. He watched it for a long time. Then he built the final test. Larger than before. Not just numbers. A model. A simplified system with internal inconsistency. He encoded imbalance into it. Variables that contradicted each other. Feedback loops that should resolve, but did not. The mathematical equivalent of a broken machine. He sent it. The signal left. Reached the object. For a fraction of a moment, nothing changed. Then the return came. Not immediate. Not delayed. Different. The pattern was no longer just corrected. It was reduced. The entire structure he had sent came back smaller. Compressed. Simplified beyond what he had transmitted. He pulled it apart. Analyzed it. Every unnecessary component removed. Every redundancy eliminated. What remained was the minimal form of the system he had sent. Not repaired. Not fixed. Reduced to its simplest possible state and nothing else. He felt it then. Not surprise. Not fear. Recognition. He whispered, "You're not just correcting." He stopped. Then finished the thought. "You're reducing." The word settled. He opened the secondary log. Typed slowly. System behavior indicates optimization through reduction. He paused. Then added. Complex input returns as simplified structure. He read it. Then wrote one more line. Function appears to minimize complexity. He sat with that. Then leaned back, further than before. The signal continued. Steady. Patient. Unchanged. As if it had completed its adjustment and was waiting for the next variable. He looked at the main display. The object had not moved. Had not changed. But the understanding had. Completely. He placed his hands on his knees, away from the console. Let the silence sit between exchanges. Then he spoke again, to the space itself. If that's what you do. He did not finish the sentence. He didn't need to. He turned back to the console. Opened the threat assessment again. 0.2. He looked at it for a long time. Then moved the cursor to add a line beneath it. Observed system behavior incompatible with current threat model. He read it. Then added one more. Further interaction required before classification. He saved the report. He returned to the signal. Still there. Still waiting. And for the first time since the beginning, the question was no longer what the object was. It was what it would do next. And what would happen if he kept answering. He did not send another sequence. The signal continued without him, holding its final simplified structure as if it required nothing further to exist. It did not decay. It did not drift. It remained exactly as it had resolved, stable in a way that suggested completion rather than pause. He watched it. Then he minimized the channel. Not closed. Never closed. Just reduced. He brought the main display forward. The object sat at 42 Australian dollars, unchanged, silent in every measurable way. If not for the narrow stream of mathematics he had just witnessed, it would still register as it had at the beginning. Minimal mass. No emissions. No movement. Negligible. He stared at that word in the report. Negligible. He scrolled past it. Down to the qualitative assessment. The section that did not rely on models. The section that relied on him. He placed his hands on the console and began to type. Object exhibits consistent interaction boundary, separating observable and unobservable properties. He paused. Then continued. Active engagement results in loss of measurable data, accompanied by structured signal response. He read it once. Then added. Signal behavior demonstrates adaptive refinement and reduction of external input into stable mathematical forms. He stopped. Looked at the object. Then finished. System appears to operate on principles not represented within current physical or analytical frameworks. He leaned back. The words were precise. They were careful. They were also, he knew, incomplete. He opened the secondary log. Read the last lines he had written. It is not passive. It is aware. He added one more. It simplifies. He sat with that. Then added. Everything. He stared at the word. Then left it. He returned to the main report. Scrolled back to the threat assessment. 0.2. He looked at it for a long time. Then opened the manual override. The field blinked, waiting. He hovered over it, then moved his hand away. Not yet. He closed the override. Saved the report as preliminary. He knew what would happen next. The file would be transmitted, reviewed, categorized, placed into a system that required everything to fit somewhere. He knew the language he had used would not survive that process intact. It would be refined, simplified, reduced. He felt a small, quiet recognition at that. Then he returned to the live feed. The object remained. Still, silent, unchanged. Except it wasn't. He opened the signal channel again. The pattern was still there, but something about it felt smaller. He checked the data. The intervals had not changed. The structure had not changed. And yet, he overlaid the previous capture, then the one before that, then the one before that, each one identical in form. But the representation was compressing. Not in time, not in amplitude, in description. The system required fewer values to represent it each cycle. He ran the compression model. It converged, faster each time. He let his breath slow. Then he looked at the main display again. At the object. He pulled the positional data. Still fixed. He pulled the mass estimate. Lower. Slightly. Within margin. He ran it again. Lower again. He opened the historical log. The value had been drifting. Not enough to trigger a flag. Not enough to be noticed until now. Until he was looking for it. Until the pattern had taught him what to look for. He ran a full recalculation. The system hesitated. Then returned the result. Mass, decreasing. Rate, minimal. Trend, consistent. He stared at the number. Then checked the energy logs. The missing energy from his probes. Unaccounted. He ran a correlation. Energy loss. Mass change. The line formed. Clean. Direct. The energy was not disappearing. It was being converted. Into what he could not say. But the conversion was happening, slowly and precisely, one interaction at a time, like a fire that burned something you could not see. He whispered it before he typed it. It's not just signals. He opened the secondary log. Fingers moving slower now. Observed reduction not limited to transmitted data. He paused, then continued. Object mass shows gradual decrease correlated with interaction events. He read it, then added. System may be reducing itself. The words sat on the screen. He did not edit them. He returned to the main display. The object looked the same. Of course it did. The change was too small, too slow. But it was there. And it had been there. He now understood, since the beginning. Since before he noticed. Since before he started looking. Since before the first probe. It had started reducing before he gave it anything to reduce. He sat back. Then he understood. Not all at once. But enough. If the system reduced complexity. If it minimized. If it simplified. Then the most complex thing in the interaction was not the signal. Not the data. Not the mathematical structures he had been sending across 6.28 billion kilometers of empty space. Him. He looked at the console. At the layers of information. At the models. The logs. The words. All of it. Complex. Redundant. Imperfect. The accumulated output of a man who had spent 11 years building systems for understanding things, and who had just realized he might be the most disorganized thing this object had ever encountered. He opened the signal channel again. The pattern waited. He placed his hand over the console. Did not move. He thought about sending another sequence. Something larger. Something more complex. To see what would come back. Then he thought about what would come back. Smaller. Simpler. Closer to something irreducible. Closer to nothing. He lowered his hand. He did nothing. For the first time since the beginning, he chose not to interact. The signal continued for a few more cycles. Then it stopped. Not abruptly. Not cut. Completed. As if there was nothing left to say. As if it had run its course and arrived at wherever it was going. The channel went quiet. He checked the object. Still there. Still silent. He checked the mass. Lower. Again. He sat in the observation chamber, the station humming quietly around him, the system continuing its steady, indifferent work. He opened the main report one last time, scrolled to the end, added a final line. Interaction suspended pending further assessment. He hesitated, then added, unknown long-term effects. He saved the file, closed it. Then he opened the secondary log, the one no one else would read. He typed slowly, each word deliberate, each word the result of 11 years of training being quietly, permanently overturned. I do not know if it is observing us. He paused, then finished, or simplifying us. He read it once, did not change it, closed the log. He sat there for a long time, looking at the empty space where the signal had been, at the object that was still there and not the same, at the data that no longer fit cleanly into anything he understood. He thought about the flag he would have to file, the review board that would read his report, the language they would use to make it manageable, the way everything he had witnessed tonight would be refined, organized, compressed into something that fit the existing system. Reduced. The station continued its quiet orbit. The system continued its quiet calculations. And at the edge of the system, something remained. Not moving, not speaking, not finished, not diminished by his attention. If anything, diminishing in its own time, at its own pace, according to its own logic, towards something he could not name and could not stop and could not understand by looking at it from the outside. He did not know what would happen if he started the exchange again. He did not know what would remain if he did. He did not know if the 0.2 on his threat assessment was a number or a joke. So he waited. And for the first time in 11 years, the method did not tell him what to do next. And he did not replace it. He just sat with the weight of that silence, in a room that felt smaller than it had an hour ago, and watched the edge of the system, and waited to find out if the thing at $42 Australian was done with him, or if it was only just beginning.